Chapter 1. The Cloud of Souls. Luca sat at the edge of his cramped apartment, staring out the smudged window at the sprawling city below. The lights from towering skyscrapers flickered in the distance like dying stars. But it wasn't the view that caught his attention, it was the endless tide of advertisements flashing on every digital screen, urging him to join the future and live forever in the cloud. The rich had found their way to immortality. Every day, thousands of ads promised the same thing: eternal life. An upload of your consciousness into the cloud, preserved forever, free from the constraints of the flesh. It was the ultimate prize, the final frontier of human existence. For those who could afford it. Luca ran his fingers through his unkempt hair, frustration gnawing at him. His sister, Eliza, had once dreamed of being uploaded. She had tried so hard to save up, but the price was far too high. They both knew it. And when she died, her dreams, and his, died with her. The day she passed, Luca had tried everything. He contacted every agency, scraped together all he could, but it was too late. The rich lived forever, while people like him were left behind to wither. A soft beep broke his reverie. His old terminal flickered to life, the screen displaying a message from his only remaining source of hope, a lesser-known, experimental cloud service called Kether Corp. Join the new wave of immortality. Affordable uploads for the masses. We'll make you part of the future. He scoffed at the message, rubbing his eyes. He had heard of Kether Corp before, barely a whisper in the industry. Rumors swirled that they took shortcuts, that their methods were untested, even dangerous. But the price was so much lower. Maybe this was it, the chance he'd been waiting for. The opportunity to escape the inevitable. Luca leaned forward, typing a reply. I want in. What's the catch? Minutes later, a response pinged back. Kether Corp. We offer affordable digital afterlife uploads. Prices are flexible based on individual circumstances. For those unable to pay, we offer an alternative path. Participate in experimental procedures, and your upload will be free. Luca hesitated. Experimental procedures. What did that even mean? His heart hammered in his chest as his eyes darted over the message. It was a risky move, he knew that. But was there really any other choice? His body was aging. Time was running out. He was desperate. Luca quickly typed his reply. I'll do it. I'm ready to sign up. A few minutes passed before another message appeared. Kether Corp. We'll need to assess your suitability for the program. Please come to our facility for further details. Luca swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the decision settling in his chest. His hands trembled as he closed the terminal. This was it. The path forward, or the final, painful step into the void. With a deep breath, he stood and grabbed his jacket, pulling it on hastily. He glanced at the door, then back at the flickering screens. The world outside felt colder, more distant, as if he were stepping away from everything he knew. His reflection in the window seemed far away, almost unreal. He wasn't sure if he was ready, but he didn't have much choice. Not anymore. There was no way he could live with himself knowing that Eliza's dream had died with her. The cold, dark streets of the city swallowed him as he stepped outside, the distant hum of the digital advertisements in the air like a haunting melody. As Luca walked toward the facility, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being drawn into something far darker than he understood. The unknown. The price of immortality was steep, but what was the alternative? He didn't know yet, but he would soon find out. Chapter 2. The Price of Immortality. The facility was nestled in the heart of the city, hidden behind layers of neon-lit streets and silent alleyways. A sleek, dark building that seemed almost too modern, too polished, like a monument to something no one could fully comprehend. Kether Corporation had built itself on secrecy, and the way the place stood in stark contrast to its surroundings only made Luca more nervous. He paused at the entrance, his breath visible in the frigid night air. The glass doors slid open with a soft hiss, and Luca stepped inside. A sudden rush of cold air greeted him, the sterile smell of chemicals and metal filling his nostrils. He couldn't help but wonder if this was what the rich felt when they entered their world of digital afterlife, detached from the chaos, untouched by time. Inside, the lobby was empty. No one greeted him. No receptionist. Just a large, glowing screen embedded into the wall, flashing a welcoming message. Welcome to Kether Corporation, the future of immortality. Your journey begins here. The only sound in the room was the low hum of the screen. Luca's eyes darted around, waiting for someone, to show him where to go. After a long moment, the screen flickered, and a voice boomed from hidden speakers. Luca Ferrara. Welcome to Kether Corporation. Please proceed to the elevator for your initial assessment. The sound of his name made his skin prickle, but he did as instructed. An elevator door slid open in front of him, and he stepped inside. There was no button to press, just a single glowing light above him, labeled Level 1. The doors closed with a soft whoosh, and the elevator descended. For the first time in years, Luca felt a mixture of hope and dread. The elevator stopped with a lurch, and the doors opened to reveal a sterile hallway lit by harsh white lights. At the end of the corridor, a set of double doors stood slightly ajar, inviting him in. He walked forward, his footsteps echoing in the silence. Inside, a group of individuals stood near a table cluttered with medical equipment. They wore lab coats, their faces hidden behind masks and goggles. A man, tall and unnervingly composed, stepped forward as Luca entered. His eyes were cold, almost lifeless, but there was a sense of power in the way he held himself. "Mr. Ferrara," he said smoothly, extending a hand. "We're glad you could make it. I'm Dr. Hagen, head of the experimental division here at Kether Corporation. I assume you know what you're signing up for." Luca shook his hand, his voice tight. "I know what I've read. Affordable uploads. Experimental procedures. I just need to know if it's real." Dr. Hagen's lips curled into a thin smile. "Everything is real, Mr. Ferrara. We don't do half measures here. If you want to join the future, you must be willing to sacrifice the past. This will not be easy." Luca nodded, his heart racing. It felt like a dream, but it wasn't. It was his only chance. "We'll begin the preliminary assessment now," Dr. Hagen continued, leading Luca toward a reclining chair. "This will be a simple scan of your brain patterns, emotional responses, and overall physical condition. Don't worry, this part is painless." Luca sat down, his hands clenched tightly at his sides. The chair reclined automatically, and a cool, metallic collar was placed around his neck. Soft lights blinked to life above him, and the room grew unnervingly quiet. A soft click echoed through the room as the scan began. The cold metal pressed against his skin, and the room seemed to shrink, the walls pulsing in rhythm with the quiet hum of machinery. For a moment, Luca closed his eyes, trying to steady his breath. He thought of Eliza. How she would have reacted if she could see him now. Maybe this was the final step to redeeming her memory. Or maybe it was all a lie. A trap. He didn't know anymore. Suddenly, the scan paused. Dr. Hagen's voice broke through the silence. "Mr. Ferrara, we've detected some irregularities in your neural patterns. It appears you may have experienced some trauma recently. This could complicate the upload process." Luca's stomach twisted. "What does that mean?" Dr. Hagen's voice was clinical. "It means your mind is unstable. Emotional trauma, memory loss, difficulty separating reality from illusion. These things could make the upload more challenging." Luca felt a pang of panic in his chest. "Is that going to disqualify me?" Dr. Hagen paused for a beat, his gaze distant. "No. It simply means you may need more time than others to prepare for the upload. But rest assured, we've successfully uploaded individuals with much more severe conditions." Luca nodded, but his mind raced. Trauma? He couldn't even remember the last time he had truly felt stable. Eliza's death had left him hollow, an empty shell searching for something to fill the void. "We'll proceed with the physical modifications, Dr. Hagen said, signaling to the assistants nearby. "This is a necessary step. Don't worry, it will only be temporary. Just a small adjustment to help your mind integrate into the upload system more smoothly." Luca tried to steady his breath. "Physical modifications?" "Yes," Dr. Hagen replied. "It will help reduce the strain on your body during the process. You'll feel a bit of discomfort, but you're here to experience the future, Mr. Ferrara. The future does not wait for those unwilling to adapt." Luca's heart beat faster, but he remained silent. There was no turning back now. As the first incision was made into his skin, the pain was sudden and sharp. He winced but kept his eyes open, unwilling to show any sign of weakness. The promise of immortality was worth the price. He had to believe that. The machines hummed louder, and the pain intensified. But all Luca could think about was the image of Eliza, her face, her dreams, her lost hope. He wasn't doing this just for himself. He was doing it for her. The sound of the machines grew more intense, the light above flickering erratically. Something wasn't right. But Luca's mind couldn't process it, the pain overwhelming his senses. As the doctors continued their work, the world around him began to fade, replaced by an eerie, oppressive silence. And for the first time, Luca felt truly alone. Chapter 3. The Experiment. Luca's body tensed as the scalpel cut deeper into his flesh. The pain, sharp and relentless, reverberated through him in waves. His mind screamed, but his body felt distant, detached, like he was watching himself from the outside. The sterile, white room blurred, and his consciousness began to drift, his vision clouded by the throbbing ache. Dr. Hagen's voice cut through the fog. "You're doing well, Mr. Ferrara. Stay focused. We're almost finished with the initial procedures. Stay focused?" Luca tried to hold on to the moment, but it felt like his mind was slipping further into the abyss. The machines around him clicked and whirred, and a faint, high-pitched tone echoed in the back of his skull. His heart raced. Another incision. The sharp sting sent a shock through his body, but this time, he didn't react. He couldn't. The pain seemed to feed on itself, growing, expanding, as if the procedure had no end. It was a grotesque rhythm, a pulsing beat that matched his erratic heart. He gasped, but no air seemed to reach his lungs. His vision flickered. For a brief moment, the sterile lights above seemed to warp, bending and twisting into strange shapes. Shadows moved in the corners of his sight. His breath quickened, and his pulse throbbed in his ears. "What's happening? Mr. Ferrara, can you hear me?" Dr. Hagen's voice sounded distant, almost muffled. "We need you to stay awake for the next part. Just breathe and stay still." Luca tried to nod, but his head felt like it was sinking deeper into the chair, as if gravity itself were pulling him into a dark void. A suffocating darkness. His limbs grew heavy, and his thoughts became muddled. He couldn't tell if he was still in the room, or if his mind had already begun to float somewhere else. Suddenly, everything went black. When Luca awoke, it wasn't in the same sterile, harshly lit room. It wasn't in any room at all. He was floating, no, suspended, in a vast, empty space. He opened his eyes, but there was nothing to see. The darkness surrounded him, suffocating. His body felt weightless, like he was drifting through the vacuum of space, but he couldn't move. He couldn't feel his limbs, his skin, or even his breath. It was as though his very existence had been stripped away. He reached out instinctively, but his hands didn't respond. Panic surged through him. Was this it? Had they uploaded him already? A low hum reverberated through the void, and Luca could feel the vibrations in his mind, distant, mechanical. It was the only sound in this eerie blackness. The more he focused on it, the more it seemed to warp, twist into something distorted, something malevolent. His thoughts were fragmenting, splintering into pieces like shattered glass. "Am I dead?" he thought. Is this the cloud? Mr. Ferrara." The voice came from all directions, yet it felt as though it was coming from inside his head. It wasn't Dr. Hagen's voice. It was softer, distorted, and unrecognizable. "Are you ready?" Luca tried to speak, to shout, but his lips didn't move. There was no sound. He was nothing but a consciousness, a fleeting thought trapped in the void. The hum grew louder, and then images. At first, they were vague, wisps of shapes and colors, swirling in the darkness. But then, as if something had triggered it, they became clearer. He saw flashes of his life, fragments of memories, like an old film reel that had been burned, then pieced back together. He saw his sister's face again. Her smile, her laughter, the way she used to sit beside him, talking about the future. The future, she had always said. They had dreamed together. But now, she was gone. The images started to flicker faster, more distorted. Luca tried to scream, but his voice was lost in the chaos. What was happening? He reached out, but his hands passed through the visions. The images shifted. Now he saw people, strange, digital shapes. They looked like people, but not quite. They flickered in and out of focus like glitching avatars in an old game. One of the figures stopped, turning toward him. Its face was a blur, but Luca felt it. It was aware of him, and it wasn't alone. More of them appeared, slowly at first, then faster, growing in number, circling him like a school of fish, but with a strange, predatory air. He was being watched. These things, whatever they were not friendly. They didn't care about him. They only wanted something. The figure in the center of the group moved forward, and Luca instinctively recoiled, but he couldn't move. It was getting closer. The figure's face was a flickering mess of static, with sharp, jagged features that looked almost human, but not quite. Its eyes were dark, hollow, like empty sockets staring into his soul. No. Luca thought. I'm not ready. I don't want this. The figure reached out, its hand a blur of motion, and as it touched his mind, his essence, Luca felt a surge of cold, a sharp pain shooting through him, deep into the core of his being. The world around him trembled, and the figures began to merge together, their voices whispering in a language he couldn't understand. The pain grew more intense, his thoughts cracking, splintering, as his consciousness was torn apart. For a brief moment, Luca caught a glimpse of the truth. This isn't immortality. This is something worse. Before he could fully comprehend it, the images vanished. The figures disappeared into the blackness, leaving only silence. Luca awoke again, but this time, he was lying flat. His chest rose and fell with shallow breaths. His skin tingled, as if his body had been returned to him, but it felt wrong. His limbs felt stiff, and his head ached, as though something was pressing down on his skull. His eyes fluttered open, and he saw Dr. Hagen's face hovering above him. The doctor's expression was unreadable, his eyes cold. Behind him stood a team of assistants, all of them watching with clinical detachment. "How are you feeling?" Dr. Hagen asked, his voice devoid of empathy. Luca tried to speak, but his throat was dry. His mind raced with fragmented memories and flashes of the void. The cloud, the figures, the pain. "Where am I?" he rasped. "You're still here," Dr. Hagen replied. "In our facility. You've just undergone the first phase of the process. But don't worry. The worst is over." Luca's heart pounded. Something was wrong. He could feel it deep inside him. He wasn't sure what had happened, but he knew one thing for sure. This wasn't what he had signed up for. "I want out," Luca whispered, his voice barely audible. Dr. Hagen's expression softened for a moment, almost like a flicker of amusement. "There's no going back, Mr. Ferrara. Not now." The darkness inside Luca's mind seemed to creep back, a cold, suffocating presence. He didn't know what he had gotten himself into, but now he was trapped. In his body, in his mind, and worse, in the cloud. It was too late to turn back now. Chapter 4. The Price of the Mind. Luca's breathing was shallow, but his body felt heavier with each passing second. The haze in his mind hadn't cleared. Instead, it clung to him like a thick fog, dulling his senses and smothering his thoughts. His surroundings seemed foreign, not quite real. The sterile walls of the room, the cold medical instruments, the beeping machines. They felt like distant fragments of a nightmare he couldn't escape. Dr. Hagen's voice cut through the thick silence. "You're stable for now, Mr. Ferrara. Your body is adapting, but you'll need more time before we proceed with the full procedure. This is just the beginning." Luca struggled to sit up, but his limbs felt like they were made of lead. His fingers twitched, but he couldn't muster the strength to move them. Every inch of his body ached, as if it had been pulled apart and reassembled. "Beginning," Luca whispered, his voice hoarse. He was barely aware of his own words, as if they were coming from someone else. This isn't what I signed up for." Dr. Hagen's gaze didn't waver. "Of course it is. You knew the risks. You wanted to join the future, and now you're here. Just relax and let the process take its course." Luca blinked, his vision unfocused. Join the future. What did that even mean? He had dreamed of escaping death, of living forever, like the rich people whose lives were broadcasted in perfect, glossy images. But this wasn't what he imagined. This wasn't immortality. This was something else. Something worse. His mind still trembled with the echoes of the figures in the void, their distorted faces and hollow eyes. The whispers in the darkness. The cold touch. "I am not ready," he thought again, but the words felt distant, like an old memory he couldn't quite reach. Dr. Hagen's voice was smooth, methodical. "You're going to feel disoriented for a while. It's natural. But soon, the process will stabilize your consciousness. Then we can upload your mind into the cloud, where you will live forever. No more pain. No more fear. Just eternity." Luca turned his head slightly, his eyes finally focusing on Dr. Hagen's expressionless face. "And what about the others?" he managed to ask, the question slipping from his lips before he could stop it. "What about the people who don't make it? What happens to them?" The doctor didn't answer right away. Instead, he glanced at one of the assistants, who nodded in response. "The procedure isn't perfect," Dr. Hagen said, his voice lowering slightly. "But we're working on it. Each test brings us closer to the ideal. Those who don't make it," he trailed off, almost as if the words themselves held no meaning. Luca tried to push himself up again. Kether Corp's hold on him was already too strong. He had signed the papers. He had agreed to the experiment. No way back. The door to the room slid open with a soft hiss, and another figure entered, a woman, dressed in a lab coat like the others, but with an aura of something else. She wasn't cold like Dr. Hagen. She wasn't calculating. There was something more, human about her, something familiar. She smiled faintly as she approached Luca's bed, but there was a sadness in her eyes. "How are you feeling, Mr. Ferrara?" she asked gently, her voice soft, almost kind. Luca struggled to find the words. "I don't know. I don't think I'm supposed to be here." The woman's eyes softened, and she lowered her gaze. "I understand. Believe me, I do. But you've already taken the first step. There's no going back. If you want what they promised you, this is the price you have to pay." Luca stared at her. "What do you mean? What's the real price?" Her eyes flickered to Dr. Hagen, who seemed to be distracted with the tablet. She lowered her voice, leaning in closer to Luca. "You don't understand what they're doing. They promise eternal life, but it's not what you think. They're playing with your mind, with your memories. What you'll be uploaded to, it's not a paradise. It's a prison." Luca's heart clenched. "What do you mean? What happens to me once I'm uploaded?" The woman hesitated, glancing around the room again to make sure no one was listening. Then she whispered, "It's not like they say. Your mind will be preserved, yes, but it won't be you. What you'll be in the cloud is just an echo, a simulation. The real you, your soul, your consciousness, will be lost in the process. Forever." Luca blinked, his head spinning. The weight of her words settled in, but they didn't make sense. "Then what's the point?" he muttered, his voice a hoarse rasp. "Why would anyone do this? Why would they let you do this?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she took a step back, her eyes filled with a sorrowful understanding. The rich, they don't care. To them, it's just a product, a service. But for people like you and me, we don't have a choice. We're disposable. They experiment on us, and we're just supposed to be grateful for the opportunity to live forever. Luca's head swam. Disposable. His thoughts circled, spiraling back to the figures in the digital void. The voices that called to him. The cold, twisting sensation that had wrapped around him in the darkness. Was that what awaited him? A digital prison? Before he could say anything more, Dr. Hagen's voice cut in. "I think it's time for you to rest now, Mr. Ferrara. We'll continue with the next phase tomorrow. The upload process will begin soon." Luca's body froze. His mind screamed for answers, for clarity, but the drugs they had administered earlier were beginning to take hold. His eyelids grew heavy, and the world around him blurred into nothingness. The woman gave him one last, fleeting look, her eyes full of pity. "You don't have to do this. If you can find a way out, please, do it." And then everything went black. When Luca awoke again, it was to the sound of machines humming, and the cold, impersonal voice of Dr. Hagen announcing the beginning of the next phase. Luca didn't answer. He couldn't. His mind felt distant, like a part of him was already gone. And in the back of his thoughts, the woman's warning echoed. "Escape the cloud, if you can." But how could he? How could he escape something he wasn't sure was even real anymore? Chapter 5. The Fracture. Luca's body felt like a cage. His muscles screamed in protest as he tried to move, but every attempt was met with resistance, like his limbs were encased in something heavy and foreign. His mind, too, seemed disconnected, distant from his body, adrift in a sea of fog. The room was dim, the lights flickering overhead as machines beeped and hummed around him. His eyes darted from corner to corner, trying to focus, trying to make sense of the disorienting, cold space he found himself in. But something was wrong. His thoughts were scattered. He couldn't hold on to them, couldn't piece together the fragments that slipped away as soon as they formed. It was like trying to catch the wind. Dr. Hagen stood by a bank of monitors, his face obscured by the glow of the screens. He glanced over his shoulder when he noticed Luca stir. "Ah, Mr. Ferrara," he said, his voice flat and clinical. "You're awake. I trust you're feeling different." Luca opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. His throat felt dry, like sandpaper against his skin. Panic began to surge in his chest. "What's happening to me?" Dr. Hagen continued, oblivious to Luca's inner turmoil. "You're undergoing something incredible, Luca. You're going to be the first of many to transcend the limitations of your body. Soon, your mind will be uploaded. Forever. Just a few more steps, and you will be part of the future." Luca's vision blurred. The doctor's words sounded like a distant echo, growing faint and hollow as if the space between them had grown too vast to bridge. He tried to sit up, his heart pounding, but the weight of his body felt like it had multiplied 100 times. He didn't feel like himself anymore, didn't feel like anything. It was as if his very essence had started to unravel. I can't." His voice cracked as the words left his mouth, barely more than a whisper. Dr. Hagen turned slowly, his eyes narrowing with a mixture of curiosity and slight annoyance. You'll adjust, Mr. Ferrara. The process is never easy for the first subjects, but you'll see, it will be worth it. The words rang hollow in Luca's mind, each syllable vibrating in an unsettling way. Worth it? Nothing about this felt right. Nothing about his body, his mind, his soul, nothing felt real. His heart raced, and the sensations from before. The terrifying, twisted images of the dark void, the figures in the digital space, flashed back in an instant. They were like ghostly echoes, ripples in the air that clawed at his very consciousness. Luca closed his eyes, desperate to steady his mind, but it only seemed to make things worse. The faint memories of his sister, Eliza, flickered across his thoughts. Her smile, her laughter, her promise that they would someday escape this life together. She's gone, Luca reminded himself. She's gone, and I'm alone. But the more he thought about it, the more disjointed the memories became. The images of her face blurred, twisted, flickering, like static on a broken screen. His mind raced, and a cold sweat broke out on his forehead. Mr. Ferrara, are you all right? Dr. Hagen's voice was sharp now, his concern faint. This is all part of the process. Just breathe. Breathe? Luca's thoughts were spiraling out of control. This isn't me, he thought. This isn't my body anymore. My mind is. Suddenly, everything went still. The machines that had been humming in the background fell silent. The walls around him seemed to pulse, undulating like something alive. His vision began to distort, the edges of the room warping into unnatural shapes. The cold, sterile space disappeared, replaced by something else. The void. Luca's heart stopped as his surroundings disintegrated. He was floating again, weightless. But this time, there were no machines. No walls. No cold, emotionless doctors. Just darkness, empty, oppressive, and cold. It's happening, Luca thought with horror. They've already uploaded me. They've already. But his thoughts were interrupted by a voice, a familiar one, echoing in the darkness. Are you ready, Luca? Luca froze, his breath hitching in his throat. No, not again. Not this. The figure appeared in the distance, just like the others before. It was barely human, just a distorted shape, its face flickering between moments of clarity and static. But there was something else. Something different. It wasn't like the others. It felt real. Felt human. Luca tried to move toward it, to ask, to scream, but his body was immobile. He was trapped in this endless digital void. The figure's face cleared, and she looked at him with wide, knowing eyes. Eliza, he breathed. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Instead, her image shattered into pixels, dissolving like sand in the wind. No, Luca shouted, but his voice was lost in the emptiness. The world around him seemed to stretch, distort, like something was trying to pull him apart. The figure reappeared, now miles away, her shape flickering with each step she took. Why? Luca tried to scream, but nothing emerged. Her form began to fragment, breaking into pieces as if her very being was unraveling in real time. No, not again. His heart thundered in his chest as a deep, horrifying realization began to dawn on him. She wasn't real. None of this was real. Luca was already dead. His body was gone, replaced by this fractured version of his mind. And the cloud? It wasn't a place of immortality. It was a prison, a place where the mind could never escape. You promised, Luca whispered, tears pricking at the corners of his eyes. You promised eternal life. The figure of Eliza vanished completely, leaving Luca in the infinite void. He was alone, but the sensation was not the cold emptiness he had expected. Instead, the void felt alive, like the space around him was waiting, watching. They knew, Luca realized. Kether Corp knew. This wasn't immortality. This was just another way to control us, to trap us. The digital world began to pulse again, and the hum of machines returned, distant, but present. The walls of his mind closed in. Luca awoke once more, but this time, he was in his body, his real body. He was back in the cold, sterile room, breathing heavily, drenched in sweat. Dr. Hagen was still there, looking at him with detached curiosity. Welcome back, Mr. Ferrara, he said. You're doing better. The upload is proceeding smoothly. Luca felt his heart beat rapidly. He wanted to scream, but the words caught in his throat. It's too late. Dr. Hagen continued, oblivious to Luca's inner turmoil. Soon, all your memories, your essence, will be preserved. You will be part of the new world, Mr. Ferrara. No more suffering. Just eternal peace. Luca didn't answer. His mind was lost in the dark void. There was no escaping it. No escaping what he had become. And worse, there was no escaping the truth. He wasn't human anymore. Not really. Chapter 6. The Fragmented Mind. Luca's body trembled as the cold reality of his situation settled in. His skin, his muscles, his organs, they felt like they didn't belong to him anymore. The physical sensations seemed distant, as though he were observing his own existence from a place beyond the body. The world around him, once so clear and concrete, now felt like an illusion, a dream he couldn't wake up from. Dr. Hagen's voice brought him back to the present. You're doing exceptionally well, Mr. Ferrara. The preliminary upload is almost complete. Your mind is adapting to the digital structure faster than expected. Soon, you'll be able to transcend the limitations of your physical form and live on, free from decay. Luca stared blankly at Dr. Hagen, his mind racing. Adapt to the digital structure? The thought was suffocating. He had no desire to transcend his body. He wanted to escape this place, to feel whole again. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized it wasn't just his body that was broken, it was his mind. The things he had seen in the digital void, the memories of Eliza, the horrifying creatures that had stalked him in the endless darkness, they weren't just figments of his imagination. They were fragments of something much worse. The upload process had started earlier than Luca had expected. His mind was already tethered to the cloud, caught in the seams between two worlds. He could feel it, a deep, unsettling sensation like his very essence was being pulled apart. The machines around him hummed again, their steady rhythm somehow more oppressive now. It was like being trapped in a cage that stretched endlessly in every direction, the bars invisible, but ever present. His thoughts felt stretched thin, hanging on the edges of something unknown. Is this really happening? Luca whispered to himself, barely audible. The voice that spoke from his own lips felt foreign, hollow. What was that, Mr. Ferrara? Dr. Hagen asked, glancing up from his tablet. Luca's throat tightened, but he didn't answer. There was nothing he could say that would make sense of the nightmare unfolding inside him. His body, his mind, his soul, they were all becoming something else. Something that wasn't him. He tried to close his eyes, to block out the sterile room and the blinding lights, but the images from the digital void returned, flashing before his eyes like ghosts. The figures, twisted, distorted, and faceless, emerged once more, their voices low and unintelligible. Please, Luca whispered, clenching his fists. Make it stop. Please, just make it stop. The figures seemed to hear him, their shapes warping as they reached out with hands that were not hands, but digital appendages, dripping with static and code. One of them drew closer, its face flickering like a malfunctioning screen. It was the same haunting, hollow face Luca had seen before. A dark, empty void where a face should be. Eyes that didn't blink. It's not real. But as the figure reached for him, Luca could feel the cold brush of its touch, sharp, piercing, like a jolt of electricity through his mind. A shock that rattled him to his core. And oh, he screamed, but the voice that came out was muffled, distorted. He could feel the words being swallowed by the vast emptiness around him. Mr. Ferrara, please calm down, Dr. Hagen said, his voice betraying no concern. You're having a brief episode. It's natural. The mind is adjusting to the upload process. Just breathe. But Luca couldn't breathe. He couldn't think. His mind was splintering further with every passing second. The figure loomed closer, its jagged outline flickering between reality and the void. Its mouth opened, but no sound came. Just static, like broken communication, fragments of words lost in translation. Luca reached out, desperate to touch something, to feel anything real, but his hands passed through the figure as though it wasn't even there. It was as if his mind was no longer attached to his body, as if he had already crossed into the realm beyond. Stop, Luca whispered again, tears welling in his eyes. Please, I'm not ready. I can't do this. The figure seemed to pause, as if considering him, before its eyes, if they could even be called eyes, shifted downward. Then, without warning, it lunged at him, its form distorting in the process, a nightmarish blur of pixels and shadows. The pain that followed was unlike anything Luca had ever felt. Sharp, like being torn apart at the molecular level, every fiber of his being screaming in agony. And then, silence. Luca awoke again, but this time, it was different. His body was still there, but it felt wrong. His limbs were stiff, his heart pounding in his chest. His head throbbed, and the familiar weight of his body felt alien, like it didn't belong to him anymore. He opened his eyes, But instead of the sterile medical room, he was surrounded by darkness. A void, similar to the one he had been lost in before, but now it felt even more oppressive, more alive. There was a presence here, something watching him. He could feel it in the air, a low hum that vibrated through his skull. "Where am I?" Luca whispered, his voice hoarse. The shadows shifted. Figures appeared at the edges of his vision, their shapes flickering between clarity and distortion. They were the same ones from before, but now they seemed closer. Closer and more tangible. They were speaking, but the words were unintelligible, a cacophony of distorted sounds that scratched at his mind. "No," Luca gasped, pressing his hands to his ears, as if it would make the noise stop. "Please, I can't." The figures drew nearer. He could see their faces, if they could even be called faces. Eyes, voids of blackness, staring into him. Through him. The hum grew louder, vibrating through his very soul. And then he heard it, his own voice, echoing back at him, distorted, a warped reflection of himself. "You're not who you think you are." The words rippled through his mind, deeper and deeper until they became the only thought that mattered. The cold realization settled in his chest like a stone. What have I become? He tried to scream, but the sound was lost in the ever-expanding void. The figures circled him now, closer than ever, their cold, empty hands reaching toward him. He could feel them, feel their presence, their touch, like digital tendrils sinking into his mind. Their whispers grew louder, becoming clear, distinct voices. "You're part of us now. Forever." A fragment in the cloud. "No," Luca cried, but it wasn't his voice anymore. It was something else, something hollow. The very thought of his identity was unraveling. "You are one of many. Just another lost soul." The figures' voices merged into a singular, horrifying chorus. Luca could no longer tell where his thoughts ended and theirs began. He was losing himself, falling deeper into the digital abyss, and he couldn't stop it. When he woke again, he was back in the cold, sterile room. But nothing felt real. His body, his mind, everything was fractured, like shattered glass. He was no longer the person he had once been. He was something different, something hollow. And he knew, deep down, that there was no way out. No escape from the cloud. Kether Corp had won. Chapter 7. The End of the Line. Lucas sat in the sterile room, his head lolling slightly to one side, his eyes vacant, staring at nothing. His body still ached, but it wasn't just the physical pain that gnawed at him. It was the emptiness inside, the unbearable weight of knowing that he was no longer himself. The walls of the room seemed to pulse, as if the very space around him was alive, breathing with the rhythm of his own fading thoughts. The hum of the machines, once comforting in their consistency, now felt like an eerie chorus, their sounds reverberating through the emptiness that had overtaken him. Dr. Hagen walked into the room, clipboard in hand, his expression as cold and unreadable as always. He looked at Luca, but there was no sympathy in his gaze, only clinical interest. "How are we feeling today, Mr. Ferrara?" Dr. Hagen asked, his voice devoid of emotion. Luca wanted to answer, wanted to tell him how his mind was breaking apart, how the digital world had swallowed him whole, but no words came. He couldn't speak. His thoughts were a jumbled mess, like a shattered puzzle that no one could ever hope to piece together again. Dr. Hagen made a note on the clipboard, seemingly unconcerned with the fact that Luca wasn't responding. "Good. You're stabilizing. The upload process is almost complete." The words hit Luca like a punch to the gut. Upload. He had already been uploaded. He was already part of the cloud. He was already lost. The figures from the void had been right. He was just another fragment, another soul swallowed by the system. There was no turning back. His mind was shattered, scattered in 1,000 pieces, lost in the digital ether. "What is left of me?" Luca thought. "What's left to save?" The room around him began to blur once more, the walls stretching and contorting like something was distorting time itself. He could hear the faint whispers again, not from the figures, those distorted voices, but from somewhere deeper within his mind. The voices were his own, his fragmented thoughts, his broken identity trying to claw its way back to some semblance of reality. But the more he tried to focus, the more his thoughts slipped away, like water running through his fingers. "Mr. Ferrara," Dr. Hagen's voice cut through the fog again. But this time, Luca could feel the undertones of something else in his words. Something darker. "It's time to move forward with the final upload phase. You'll be fully integrated soon. No more pain, no more fear. Just peace. Luca's heart pounded. Peace. This wasn't peace. It wasn't freedom. It was a prison. Before he could react, Dr. Hagen stepped forward and adjusted something on the machines next to Luca's bed. The room grew colder, the air thick with an unnatural stillness. Luca's pulse quickened. No, no more. I can't do this. I can't be a part of this anymore. He tried to move, but his body didn't respond. His limbs were too stiff, too disconnected. He felt like a passenger in his own skin. He could see Dr. Hagen, hear his voice, but it was like they were miles away, separated by an unbridgeable gap. His mind screamed for freedom, for something, anything that could return him to the world he once knew. But there was no way back. He was already gone. A sudden, sharp pain pierced through his skull, and his vision swam. He gasped, but no air seemed to fill his lungs. The pain intensified, twisting inside him, until it felt like his very soul was being wrenched apart. His body couldn't keep up with the upload, couldn't survive the transition. But it wasn't just his body that was being torn, it was his mind. His memories, his very essence, were being sucked into the cloud, processed, and fragmented. He could feel it, the pull of the system, dragging him into an endless void. He was becoming part of something monstrous, something that had no regard for the person he had been. And yet, he couldn't stop it. Luca's vision flickered, his thoughts scattered, and in that moment of disorientation, something changed. The machines around him began to hum with a new intensity. The sounds they made were different now, darker, distorted, like something was malfunctioning. Luca tried to scream, but the words were lost to the void. Instead, he felt his consciousness being pulled in every direction at once, twisted, stretched thin, splintered into 1,000 pieces. Then, a voice broke through the chaos. "You've been misled, Mr. Ferrara." Luca's eyes snapped open, though he could barely see. The voice was distorted, echoing inside his mind, but he recognized it. It was hers. Eliza. His voice cracked, but the words seemed to dissolve before they could leave his mouth. "Yes," the voice whispered, a soft, familiar sound. "I've been here all along, Luca. I've been watching." Luca felt something inside him stir, something that wasn't part of the machine, wasn't part of the cloud. It was a flicker of humanity, a shred of the person he used to be. "You're not dead," Eliza's voice continued, her words filled with a haunting clarity. "But you're not alive, either. You've crossed into something else. Something that was never meant to be." Luca's chest tightened. "Something else? I can feel you, Luca. I can feel you here, inside this place. The cloud is not what they promised. It's not eternal life. It's a prison. And they've been feeding on you, on all of us." Luca's mind reeled. A prison? That wasn't what he'd been told. This was supposed to be a paradise. The escape from death. But now, as the voice of his sister, his only family, echoed in his mind, he realized the truth. "This is no escape," Eliza whispered. "It's a trap. You're just a cog in their machine, Luca. And you're not the only one. They're using you, using all of us. You have to fight." The words cut through the fog of Luca's broken thoughts, like a beacon in the darkness. He wasn't alone. He never had been. But even as the realization hit, Luca felt something deeper, darker stirring inside him, something not his own. Dr. Hagen's voice, again, sharp and clinical, echoed in the background. "Time to proceed with the final integration. You will be preserved in the cloud. You will be free." But Luca couldn't let it happen. Not this time. He didn't know how, but the voice of Eliza was all he needed to hear. This wasn't freedom. It was the end. He fought. He clawed against the digital walls that had caged him, against the pieces of his broken mind that were being fed into the system. "I won't be a part of this anymore." His thoughts shattered further, splintering like glass. The machine's hum grew louder, and the figures, that began to appear again, their faces a swirling mass of data, of distorted forms. But this time, Luca didn't let them take him. He fought against them, against the pull of the system, with everything left inside him. "No." He screamed, his voice shaking the very walls of his mind. "I won't be a part of you." And then, just as the upload process reached its apex, everything stopped. The figures, the hum of the machines, the dark void, everything froze. Luca was suspended in time, a fragment caught between worlds. The echo of Eliza's voice was still there, lingering in the space around him, but it was fading. For the first time, Luca felt the truth seep in. He wasn't gone yet. And maybe, just maybe, he still had a chance to escape. But the darkness was closing in, and Luca knew that no matter what, the clock was ticking. The cloud was relentless. Chapter 8. The Breaking Point. Luca's body felt like it wasn't his own anymore, each movement heavy and detached, as if he were trying to walk through molasses. The air around him was thick, oppressive, but there was something else, something wrong with the way the space around him felt. The harsh fluorescent lights buzzed above him, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch and bend unnaturally. He was out, wasn't he? He had escaped from the cold, sterile room. He had torn himself free from the digital web of Kether Corporation. The machinery, the endless hum, all of it was behind him. But why did the hallway seem to shift as he moved down it? Why did the walls flicker, bending at the edges of his vision like a mirage in the desert? Focus, Luca thought. Just focus. You're free. This is real. This is the real world. His footsteps echoed in the silence, hollow and distant. But there was no answer from the empty halls, no sound but his own breath and the faraway hum of machinery he couldn't quite place. The air was cold, the sterile chill of the facility still clinging to him. The walls were too smooth, the floor too perfect. It felt wrong. Luca took another step, the pressure in his chest growing as his mind screamed for clarity. Every part of him wanted to believe that he had truly escaped, that he was no longer a prisoner. But with each passing second, the world around him began to warp, the lines between reality and nightmare blurring. Maybe I never really left. The thought gnawed at him, a whisper deep in the back of his mind. He blinked hard, trying to push it away, but the sensation of instability didn't leave. Instead, it grew stronger, more intense. The hallway in front of him felt like it was elongating, stretching endlessly in both directions. He couldn't escape it. And then, the flicker. A shadow passed by his peripheral vision, too fast for him to catch. He whipped his head around, but nothing was there. The hallway was still the same. But was it? Luca's heart beat faster. Keep moving. His instincts screamed for him to run, to get away from whatever this place was, to break free from the twisting grip of his own mind. He started walking faster, his steps unsteady, as if the world itself was slipping beneath him. The wall seemed to narrow as he went, the corridor constricting around him, pushing him forward, tighter, as if the very space was closing in. He reached out, his hand brushing the smooth surface of the wall, the cold metal of it grounding him for a moment. The sensation felt solid enough, real enough. But then, as he touched it, a shiver ran through him, and the world flickered again. The edges of the hallway seemed to warp, bending in unnatural ways. No, not again. Luca squeezed his eyes shut, his fists clenched at his sides. The room, the corridor, everything around him seemed to tilt, like the world had become a fragile construct, held together by nothing more than the faintest sliver of his own mind. When he opened his eyes again, everything had changed. The hallway was the same, but it felt different. It was as if the walls themselves had taken on a new shape, as if they were shifting with his every thought, every movement. His surroundings had become too fluid, too alive. The colors were sharper now, the edges of everything too crisp. The light above him flickered again, not just a simple glitch but a deliberate stutter, as if the space itself were glitching, fighting against him. Am I still in the cloud? The thought was like a punch to his chest. He had broken free, hadn't he? He was free of Kether Corporation. He was out of that sterile room, out of the experiments, out of the upload. But if this was real, if this was the real world, then why did it feel so wrong? Luca staggered forward, his head spinning. He needed to get out, to escape. But every step seemed to pull him further into the ever-widening void of uncertainty. The wall seemed to stretch on forever, the hallway never-ending. The further he went, the more the world around him warped, distorted, bending into something else. The corridor seemed to breathe, alive with some other force. No, I'm not going back. He shook his head, but the doubt wouldn't leave him. He needed to know. He needed to understand what was real. And then, without warning, a shadow passed by him again, too quick to catch, but this time it was different. It lingered just a little too long. What was that? Luca froze, his heart hammering in his chest. His feet didn't move. The shadow, the figure, had stopped, just for a brief moment, like it was waiting for him. It was an unsettling feeling, like being observed by something that wasn't quite human. His breath quickened. He took another step, but it felt as though the ground had shifted beneath him. The hallway in front of him seemed to open up into something else, something dark and endless, like a void. His stomach lurched as the air grew thicker, denser, wrapping around him like a heavy fog. I'm losing it, he thought, squeezing his eyes shut. He couldn't trust his eyes, couldn't trust what he was seeing. He wasn't sure what was real anymore. When he opened his eyes again, the hallway was the same. The walls were smooth. The lights above were steady. The floor was solid beneath his feet. He was here. But was he? Luca reached out to touch the wall again, his fingers brushing against the surface. The cold metal grounded him for a brief moment, but a strange ripple ran through the air, like something had shifted. The flicker returned. The light stuttered again. Am I still in the real world? The question haunted him, gnawing at the edges of his thoughts. The hallway before him was no longer just a hallway. It was a fragment of something, pieced together by his mind, by his broken sense of what was real. It was as though the very space around him was responding to his thoughts, adapting to his confusion, bending to the limits of his perception. And in that moment, he understood. He wasn't free, not truly. The walls weren't real. The hallway wasn't real. His escape hadn't been real. This place, this corridor, was just another layer, another creation of his shattered mind. And now, he was stuck in it. Luca closed his eyes, trying to steady himself, trying to find something solid, something true. But when he opened them again, the hallway was still there, bending, warping, twisting around him. The boundaries between the real world and the cloud had blurred. And Luca was left in the middle, caught between two realities, unsure where the line between them began or ended. He wasn't sure where he was anymore. But maybe, he realized, that was the point. The world around him flickered, and everything seemed to stretch further out of reach. He could no longer tell if he was running through a real hallway or walking deeper into the cloud. All he knew was that the escape had never been real. And now, neither was the world. Chapter 9. Fractured Reality. Luca stumbled, his breath ragged in his chest, his heart hammering against his ribcage. His body felt unsteady, his legs like lead. But his mind was alive, more alive than it had been in what felt like forever. The oppressive hum of the machines that had dominated his every thought was gone, but something still lingered, something cold and unsettling. He pushed forward, his fingers brushing the cold metal of the doorframe as he stepped into the hallway. The walls around him flickered, then wavered, like a television struggling to find its signal. The flickering lights overhead cast sharp shadows, stretching unnaturally long and bending in impossible angles. A shiver ran down his spine as he glanced around, but there was no time to pause. He couldn't afford to stop. Escape, he thought, the word looping through his mind like a mantra. His feet pounded against the cold floor, each step echoing through the hallway, but the sound of his footsteps seemed wrong. Too hollow, too distant. The hallway stretched on ahead of him, yet it felt like it was closing in on him, the walls pressing inward, like they were watching him, waiting. Get out. Get out now. Luca's pulse quickened as he ran faster, the corridor narrowing, his chest tightening. The air felt thick, heavy, as though it were growing denser with each breath he took. His eyes darted from side to side, looking for an exit, any exit. But there was nothing, no end, no escape. Just endless hallway, just cold, sterile walls that seemed to distort around him. He slammed into something soft, but solid, and stopped short. The space around him wavered. The floor beneath him seemed to ripple like water, and the lights above flickered again, casting long, exaggerated shadows. Luca squeezed his eyes shut, his hands shooting to his temples as the wave of dizziness threatened to overtake him. He tried to steady himself, but the pressure in his skull grew unbearable. His breath came in shallow gasps, and his hands trembled, like he was about to fall apart. When he opened his eyes again, the hallway had changed. The lights were back to their usual, steady hum, and the floor felt solid beneath his feet once more. The walls, smooth, undisturbed, stretched ahead of him. He blinked, unsure if he had imagined the distortion, unsure if he had just been seeing things. The hallway wasn't the same. It was real. It was real. He inhaled deeply, trying to calm the swirling sensation in his chest. The panic that had been clenching his heart started to loosen, but only a little. He was still unsure, still dizzy from the disorientation, and yet something inside him told him to keep moving. Luca took a tentative step forward, his gaze flickering to the side as he passed the doorways. Each door was identical. Each door felt like a trap. But then, another shift, barely perceptible, but enough to make his skin crawl. The air didn't feel the same. The room. No, the corridor seemed to pulse around him, the walls curving inward just slightly, as if they were breathing. No, not again. He stopped dead in his tracks, his heart pounding faster, his thoughts spiraling. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. His hand shot to his forehead as the dizzying, nauseating sensation returned, his vision swam, colors bleeding into one another, the hallway warping again, bending like light through water. He closed his eyes tightly, squeezing them shut as if it could help make sense of what he was seeing. But when he opened them again, everything was fine. The hallway was unchanged. The light steady. The walls solid. Am I losing my mind? His pulse was still rapid, but he felt a strange calm settling over him. He was here. He had to be. He had escaped. Or had he? The question echoed in his mind as he took another step forward, his hand pressed against the cool, smooth surface of the wall. The air felt normal, but the nagging thought lingered. What if it's not? Luca stumbled forward again, his hand still gripping the wall, the floor beneath his feet suddenly uneven. He stopped, taking another deep breath, trying to focus. His head was pounding, a dull ache that seemed to reverberate through his very bones. Then, something caught his eye. A flicker. A brief moment of movement. A shadow flitted past him, a figure, but it was gone before he could make out what it was. He stopped again, frozen in place, his pulse racing. His mind churned with 1,000 questions, 1,000 doubts. He wasn't sure anymore. He wasn't sure of anything. The hallway stretched before him, but now it felt different. It wasn't just the lights or the air. There was a subtle change, a shift in the fabric of his surroundings. The walls seemed to move, bending ever so slightly, like they were breathing, like the space around him was alive and changing, adapting to his every thought, his every step. He closed his eyes again, trying to steady himself. Focus, Luca. He was here. He was out. But was he? Luca opened his eyes once more. He blinked, and the hallway, no, not the hallway anymore, was different. The walls weren't walls. They were fluid, changing, like he was in a place that didn't belong to the real world. It was as if his mind had begun to shift and bend, adjusting to the confines of this place. This cloud. His imagination had started filling in the blanks, adapting to what he thought was real. It was like his mind was rebuilding reality from the fragments of the digital world it had left behind. His heart hammered in his chest. The feeling of running, of escaping, felt wrong. The world wasn't real. Or maybe it was too real. Maybe it had always been this way. Luca stood there in the hallway, unsure of what was happening. His head was spinning, his thoughts scattered. He wanted to believe this was real, that he had broken free, that he was back in the world he had fought so hard to escape. But the more he thought about it, the more uncertain he became. Was he really here? Or was this just another layer of the cloud, another fragment of his mind trying to fill in the spaces, trying to hold on to a reality that wasn't his? He didn't know. The hallway stretched on, and Luca felt as though he were standing at the edge of something vast, something incomprehensible. A part of him wanted to run, to keep going, to escape again. Another part of him knew that no matter how far he ran, he might never be truly free. With each step he took, he wasn't sure if he was leaving the cloud or just diving deeper into it. But as he moved forward into the ever-shifting corridor, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had never really left. Or maybe, just maybe, he never would.